Alright, some of you may be asking what happened to Fitting 101. Well, quite frankly, I abandoned the idea after sinking about 4 hours into it. I was getting bogged down in the minutia, and even if my video was an improvement over what was already out there, I still would have only succeeded in making yet another basic fitting video. So rather than fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy, I decided to just move on to some more advanced stuff. However, I will post some links to some basic fitting resources in the description down below. Alright, let's move this along. As always, I'm a verbose bastard, so I'm providing a TLDR along with timestamps for those who want to skip around. Server ticks are kind of like frames per second, but instead of it involving how often the displayed graphics are updated, it concerns how often the universe is updated. In EVE, this happens once per second. We can kind of think of 1 second as the smallest unit of time that has any meaning in EVE. I say kind of because there are tasks that are divorced from the tick. Regardless, all this under the hood stuff has an effect on various mechanics and it can influence outcomes. Thus, we should have at least a rudimentary understanding of the nuts and bolts and then factor that into our decision-making process. Now, I understand that some of this stuff may seem a little complex and overwhelming. So, the way I'm going to handle things is that I'm going to go in depth for those interested in the nitty-gritty details, but I'm also going to try to provide a simplified and concise takeaway wherever possible. Ready? Alright, let's dive in. So missiles only fly in discrete 1-second intervals. If you have a 2.8 second missile flight time, your missiles won't fly for 2.8 seconds. Instead, they'll fly for 3 seconds 80% of the time, and for 2 seconds 20% of the time. This means that you can lose out on some serious DPS in certain situations. Let's look at an example. Here we can see our tooltip lying to us. Its stated range is based upon a 3.5 second flight time, which we know can't happen. In reality, half of our missiles will only fly for 3 seconds. Thus, if we are shooting at something between 24 km and the stated tooltip range of 27 kilometers, we'll actually lose 50% of our DPS. So, how do we deal with this problem? Well, if we don't want to change our fit, we should use math to figure out our maximum effective range and then do most of our fighting within that range. Just remember to simulate your ship to see the effects of the missile guidance computer, which is an active module. Our second solution involves tweaking our fit so that our missile flight time is a whole number or close enough that the difference is negligible. There are items which fit in mid, low, and rig slots, as well as implants, so we have plenty of options available to us. Finally, training up missile bombardment to level 4 or 5 can sometimes solve the problem. Unfortunately, however, it will still leave other missile types with flight times involving decimals. Align times are also affected by server ticks. Specifically, they are always rounded up to the nearest whole number. Thus, a 2.01 second align time is functionally equivalent to a 3 second align. Unfortunately, adjusting align times requires a bit of fiddling. You want to shoot for the lowest whole number that you can reach, but with the smallest drawback and by using the fewest amount of modules. Moreover, if you can get some extra speed out of it, that would be even better. So what are our options? Inertial stabilizers offer the best inertia modifier, but with the nasty penalty of increasing our signature radius. This will make it easier for other ships to lock us, such as tacklers in a gate camp, and it can increase our incoming damage. Nanofibers do have a structure HP penalty, but it's not as bad as you might think. First, most of our HP should be in shields or armor. Second, the velocity bonus can help mitigate damage. And 3, decreasing our align time without increasing our sig will make us a lot more slippery. As for rigs, try and use polycarbon engine housings if you can. Like nanofibers, they also provide a velocity bonus. Of course, if they can't cut the mustard, then you'll have to use low friction nozzle joints. Finally, there are various implants which can also bring your align time down. So, the more I dug into lock times, the more I realize that they really deserve their own video. However, I will share with you what I know, or I think I know. First, don't trust PIFA. If you can't stand the thought of anyone slipping through your grasp, you'll need a better scan resolution than what it says. Second, we'll need to use some combination of items to bring our lock times down to the desired level. Just be sure not to forget about any of the tools at your disposal, including overheating. Third, we'll need to do some math in order to determine what our scan resolution should be. However, don't worry, I'm not going to be getting into the weeds here. I did, however, want to throw this stuff up on screen for those who were curious. Anyway, ships with the lowest possible SIGs are pods, shuttles, and the special edition ship, the Zephyr. However, if we're willing to loosen our standards a bit, we'll need to shoot for ships with SIGs of 30 and higher. Of course, if they have any items fitted that increase their signature radii, then they'll be easier to lock. But we want to make sure that nothing slips through our fingers. Unfortunately, the math is even worse than this, though. And that's because our individual latencies will play a role in our ability to insta-lock. Reportedly, we'll need to improve our lock time by twice our ping time in order to compensate for latency. Unfortunately, I have not tried verifying this. I can, however, give you the formula and do some math for you. Finally, we arrive at our formula, as well as some suggested scan resolutions for the no compromise insta-locker. If your latency is really bad, however, you should consider flying a different role and providing remote sensor and/or command burst support to the insta-lockers. And yes, latency is related to geography, so Europeans will have an edge while Aussies get the shaft. Finally, your reaction time will play a role here, so you'll want to clear everything except for non-friendly ships off of your overview and start spamming Control plus left click on the spot on the overview where your prey will show up. Having a cloak picket on the other side of the gate can also help to give you a heads up. Alright, that's it for lock times. I've already spent way too much time on it. If you want to know more, you'll have to do your own research and testing. And because there is debate over whether a 1 second align time is even possible, here's one of the cheaper ways I found of doing it. With a 1 second align time, not even ultra lockers would be able to catch us. However, we still wouldn't be completely immune to all threats. Many items that provide multiplicative or percentage-based bonuses are subject to stacking penalties, which reduces the effectiveness of additional items. Note that items don't have to be the same thing. What's relevant is whether they affect the same stat or not. Fortunately, stacking penalties are applied to items in descending order of their size bonuses. For example, between two items with a 12% and a 10% bonus respectively, the item supplying the 12% bonus would provide its full bonus, while the 10% item would get a stacking penalty and only provide 86.9% of its bonus for a total of an 8.69% bonus. Pretty simple, right? Yeah, no, there are exceptions. Don't worry though, because we are going to simplify this thing. But first, because some items are not subject to stacking penalties, and because percentage-based bonuses multiply the bonuses and stats of other items, some modules end up working better together. An example might help to explain what I mean. Don't freak out when you see it. Okay, the math is here for those who are interested. Pause if you need to, because we're not going to linger. What everyone should be taking away from this, however, is that flat bonuses from items are added first, then they are multiplied by percentage bonuses. Thus, a rig that increases shield HP will apply that bonus not only to the ship's base HP, but also to any shield extenders that are fit. Alright, so let's put this all together into something simple and concise. Basically, stack the green stuff and try not to stack other stuff past 3. Do note that this chart is not all-inclusive. Power gamers and theory crafters will need to know all the nitty-gritty details when it comes to stacking, but newer players can get a lot of mileage out of this chart. We're almost done with all the math stuff, so bear with me. Anyway, using scripts and scriptable modules doubles one of its bonuses while zeroing out the others. This can be used to effectively reduce the number of modules being stacked and result in higher stats. Let's take a look at how that works. In both of the examples here, we have two tracking computers modifying optimal, fall-off, and tracking. However, neither are scripted in the first example. Since they both affect the same stats, the second one suffers a stacking penalty. The result is that the first applies its full bonus, and then the second applies its diminished bonus on top of that. The color numbers represent the overall stat increase after both tracking computers have applied their bonuses. In the second example, the tracking computers are loaded with an optimal range and a tracking speed script respectively. Now, both computers offer a double strength bonus, but only to either range or tracking. Since they no longer affect the same stats, no stacking penalty is applied. Now, you might be thinking, Lottie freaking da, there's hardly any difference between the numbers. Do note, however, that I chose this particular example for its simplicity and not for dramatic effect. Indeed, the more modules and rigs that are being stacked, the greater the effect of using the script loophole. Finally, because of stacking penalties, EWar drones mostly suck. ECM drones, however, have an all or nothing effect, so stacking the penalties don't apply to them. Their jam chance is rather low, but they can be useful in certain situations. The other drones, however, each have small debuff effects, which are rendered even smaller by stacking penalties. Now, I did read one guy mention that mixing a flight of target painter and webbing drones reduces the stacking penalties and can result in better damage application against smaller targets, but I haven't done any math or testing to see if the end result is better than just packing on some light combat drones. Honestly, I'm skeptical, but I thought it was interesting enough to mention. Meta modules fall into two different categories. The tiered system was based on the idea that modules would become more expensive as they grew more powerful. Naturally, players flocked to meta level 4 items and ignored the rest. CCP didn't like the false choice that this system created and has slowly been converting items through a process dubbed tiericide. Under the new system, meta modules have one variable tweaked to suit a particular need. Not only that, but modules have a keyword inserted into their name which alludes to how they're special. Needless to say, I'm a big fan of the new system. Unfortunately, however, CCP seems to be dragging their feet with the conversion, so expect to find items modeled under both systems. History lesson aside, you'll typically want to go with Meta 4 if the item falls under the old system. But if it's been converted to the new system, then you'll have a meaningful choice to make. Compact versions are used to free up fitting room on tight fits. However, if you have enough fitting room, definitely go with the different variant. Not only will you get the benefit of that variant, but they're typically cheaper than compact versions. So this isn't going to be an all-inclusive list, but I did feel that certain modules with penalties were worth mentioning. The reasons why each module made the list varies, so we'll just have to power through this one by one. First, module penalties are usually removed if you offline a module. So, players will sometimes offline modules in certain situations. Here, for example, you can see me offline a shield extender after my shields are depleted. Since I'm no longer receiving any benefit from the module, it makes sense to turn it off and to remove its penalty to sig radius. Cloaking devices, however, provide an exception. Their scan resolution penalty persists as long as you have one fitted to your ship. It doesn't matter if it's online or not. Do note that covert ops cloaking devices don't carry the same penalty to scan resolution, but they still have the sensor recalibration time penalty after decloaking. Warp core stabilizers carry a massive penalty to scan resolution and targeting range. Moreover, they take up valuable low slots. As a result, they're typically reserved for haulers, traveling fits, and slippery fit explorers. Shield extenders and armor plates have penalties to signature radius and mass respectively. Of course, the penalties aren't so bad that you shouldn't use the mods, but you should be aware of them. So what's the takeaway? Well, first, train your fitting skills. It will allow you to more frequently use restrained rather than compact variants. Second, their penalties play a big role in discouraging dual tanks. Having a fat sig radius or a slower speed isn't that bad, but being fat and slow is going to make it easy for people to catch and apply damage to you. Anyway, there's more to it than that, but I'll save it for a video about tanks. Most rigs carry penalties, but these can be reduced with their corresponding rigging skill. As a result, I advise that you train the rigging skills for the rigs you use to 4 rather early. You can worry about polishing them off to 5 later in your career. Microwarp drives are paired with massive penalties to compensate for their amazing speed bonuses. So, how do we handle MWDs? First, we need to know when to fit an MWD and when to fit an AB. Well, multiple factors will ultimately influence our decision, including activity, role, location, intended prey, and ship bonuses, but a simple rule of thumb to get you started is to fit afterburners in high sec and low sec, and microwarp drives in null sec and wormholes. That's hardly the end of the matter, but a more in-depth discussion will have to wait for another time. Second, try to use restrained microwarp drives over other variants, including the enduring. Restrained MWDs not only suffer a smaller sig bloom, but also a smaller penalty to capacitor capacity. Thus, the difference to overall cap stability between the two is often negligible. Finally, MWDs require more advanced piloting. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but you definitely need to know how to spiral when using one, and it will require greater module management. What I mean by that is that you'll frequently need to turn it on and off in order to conserve cap and or reduce incoming damage. Anyway, spiraling is a pretty important skill, so I'll post Azual Skoll's tracking and spiraling video in the comments down below. Alright, so we already discussed inertial stabilizers and nanofibers when we talked about align times, so I'm not going to go through it all again. Just remember that while they can be quite useful, you should still take their penalties into account when putting them onto your fits. What you carry in your drone and cargo bays should be considered as part of your fit. Drone and ammo selection is beyond the scope of this class, however you should make sure to carry slightly more rounds than you think you'll need. Don't carry enough and you run the risk of running out. Carry too much and you have no room for loot, and you give anyone who kills you a fat stack of ammo or nanite repair paste. So, how much is appropriate? Well, that depends on what you're doing and where you're going. If you're going on a 30 jump roam, you'll probably want to carry more ammo and paste than if you're manning a gate cap in your home system. If you want a more solid answer than that, try the posted suggestions and then adjust accordingly. Also, don't forget the scripts for the modules that use them. Even if you're not planning on using them, I still recommend carrying them. They're cheap and small, and you may find yourself in a situation where they prove useful. By freeing up slots for other modules, fitting skills indirectly increase the performance of damn near every ship in the game. Needless to say, I recommend that you train your fitting skills. They are worth it. I recommend training CPU and power grid management to 5 ASAP and training your other fitting skills to 4. And you can worry about training them to 5 at a later date. Alright, here's the part where I intended to beg for support. But quite honestly, making videos has given me a newfound respect for the time and effort my favorite channels have poured into their videos. I mean, I never thought it was quick and easy to make a quality video, but damn, I did not anticipate it to take this much work. So, I ask that you support all the content creators that you enjoy. Like, share, subscribe, leave words of encouragement, and all that good stuff. Alright, until next time, fly smart. So what did happen to Tier's side? I guess we'll never know.